Alright folks, grab your coffee, tea, or whatever keeps you awake these days because it's about to get real controversial in here. Today, we're diving into a Pandora's box of Supreme Court decisions that have shaped, shaken, and stirred America over the past few decades. From landmark rulings to eyebrow-raising judgments, these decisions have sparked debates, protests, and even legendary memes. So, buckle up, because we're about to embark on a journey through legal history that's more dramatic than a courtroom scene from Better Call Saul. But before we begin, I ask you to do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. By subscribing, you're helping us grow, and we're committed to making this channel even better for you. We'll listen to your feedback, cover the topics you care about, and keep delivering great content. Thank you for your support. Now back to the video. Drum rolls. Hot on the news right now is the presidential immunity case involving President Donald Trump, officially known as Trump vs. United States. The Supreme Court has been taken to task to answer a simple question. Can a former president claim immunity for their actions while in office? In this case, the actions in question are allegedly inciting an insurrection. While this might seem like a straightforward case at first glance, a closer look at the law and history brings up a few issues. First, no American president in history has ever been prosecuted for actions taken while in office. Not even Nixon in the Watergate scandal, or Bill Clinton after his high-profile affair. However, while this might be the case, it's important to remember that no American law provides presidents with criminal immunity or immunity from criminal offenses. Critics argue that granting such immunity could set a dangerous precedent, essentially creating an untouchable class of presidents. Imagine the scandals that could inspire. On the other hand, imagine the political witch hunt that would follow every election cycle. What a juicy pickle. And then there's Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the seismic case that dismantled nearly 50 years of abortion rights established under Roe versus Wade. Remember the hysteria that gripped the entire nation after the decision was made? And justifiably so. The narrow 6-3 ruling effectively handed the power to regulate abortion laws back to individual states, triggering immediate and polarizing reactions nationwide. Protests erupted in major cities, legal battles ensued, and state legislatures scrambled to enact their own policies. Fewer decisions have been as polarizing as this particular case. The country's political and social fabrics were shaken, with states dividing themselves into either pro-choice or pro-life strongholds. All the while, it's women's health care hanging in the balance. Whether you see it as a win for states' rights, a rollback of women's freedoms, or a step toward reshaping constitutional interpretations, there's no denying that this was one of the most consequential rulings of our time. The legacy it created will be studied and debated for generations. But SCOTUS controversies didn't start in 2023. Oh no, this roller coaster has been running for decades. Let's rewind to the civil rights era. Remember Brown versus Board of Education? The unanimous 1954 ruling that declared, hey, maybe segregated schools aren't equal after all? It was a monumental victory for racial equality and a critical blow to the doctrine of separate but equal established in Plessy versus Ferguson. The decision ignited hope for integration and justice, but also sparked fierce resistance. Some states responded with policies of massive resistance, closing public schools rather than integrating them. Others dragged their feet for years, forcing further court battles and federal interventions. This landmark ruling not only reshaped education but also laid the foundation for the broader civil rights movement. Fast forward to 1967, where we have Loving vs. Virginia. For those not too young to remember, Love literally conquered all when the court struck down bans on interracial marriage in their ruling. Up until then, the infamous anti-miscegenation laws made intermarriage between whites and non-whites a punishable offense. In fact, in some states, even sexual relationships between the two groups were illegal. Well, that was until Mildred and Richard Loving, which went on to become an enduring symbol of resilience and justice. The couple's quiet defiance started with a simple act of love, getting married in Washington, D.C., only to face arrest upon returning to their home state, Virginia, where such unions were illegal. The case went all the way up to the Supreme Court after years of litigation, whereupon the court reaffirmed that the freedom to marry is a basic civil right. This decision, while unpopular among some people, not only dismantled racist laws, but also paved the way for future fights for marriage equality. Now let's get back to women's rights. In 1971, Reed v. Reed became the first Supreme Court case to declare gender discrimination unconstitutional, marking a significant milestone in the fight for equality. The case might have seemed mundane on the surface, a dispute over who should administer an estate, but its implications were profound. The court's ruling affirmed that laws giving preference to men over women were unconstitutional, setting a precedent that gender could not be a basis for arbitrary legal distinctions. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, then an emerging legal scholar, crafted the argument for the plaintiff, skillfully demonstrating how such laws perpetuated inequality. This victory was not just a win for the Reeds, it was a foundational moment that paved the way for decades of progress in women's rights, including Ginsburg's later groundbreaking work as a Supreme Court justice. But let's look at something a little more recent and just as controversial. The Supreme Court's 2015 decision in Obergefell versus Hodges legalized same-sex marriage nationwide, cementing love as a right for all, regardless of gender. But here's an interesting tidbit. It was a razor-thin 5-4 decision, with Justice Anthony Kennedy casting the pivotal vote. His majority opinion framed marriage equality as a fundamental liberty under the Constitution, sparking celebrations across the country while equally fueling backlash in some states. This close call underscored how much influence a single justice can wield in shaping history. And speaking of swing votes, do you know about Justice Sandra Day O'Connor's decisive role in Grutter versus Bollinger? In this 2003 case, she upheld affirmative action in university admissions, emphasizing that diversity enriches education and strengthens society. However, she also cautioned against reliance on quotas, suggesting that affirmative action policies should eventually phase out as equality progresses. Unfortunately, just a decade later, there seems to be growing sentiments that affirmative action has been ineffective and has primarily been used to fill quotas without merit. Of course, it's not all civil rights and liberties. Let's talk about Citizens United. In this rather obscure case whose details most people have forgotten, the Supreme Court in 2010 ruled that corporations enjoy the same rights as individuals. This effectively greenlit unlimited spending by corporations and unions on TV advertisements and other election materials in political campaigns. Thanks to this ruling, the cash floodgates in politics were opened wide. How wide? Think about this. In 2010, super PACs spent an average of about $62 million on advertisements. But as of 2020, this number had surged to over $2 billion. Mind-blowing. The court argued the actions of these lobby groups constitute free speech, and that the law must protect the right of corporations to influence the political process just as individuals can. Critics, however, see it as something far more problematic, a system that gives billionaires and giant corporations the equivalent of a bullhorn, drowning out the voices of ordinary voters. I mean, for politicians, whose interests are likely to come first, those of the ordinary citizens who voted you in, or those of the super PAC offering $4 million in ad spending for your campaign? Either way, the ruling in Citizens United has had profound consequences, fundamentally altering how elections are run in the U.S. All right, folks, as we wrap up this whirlwind tour through SCOTUS controversies, what are the key takeaways? That the Supreme Court, essentially 9 people in black robes, has the power to shape every facet of American life. Whether it's racial justice, gender equality, LGBTQ+ rights, or the role of money in politics, these decisions aren't just legal footnotes. They're defining moments in our nation's history. So, the next time you hear about a Supreme Court case, pay attention. It might just be the next chapter in America's ongoing story of justice, power, and, let's face it, a fair bit of drama. For more videos, click this pop-up here and stay tuned for the next videos. As always, thanks for watching.